Ben Hogan didn't reach the height of his powers till he was in his mid-30s. In part, that was due to the war, but it was also because it took him several years to eliminate a tendency to hook at critical moments. At the root of his problems was an inclination to come into the hitting area too fast, releasing the clubhead through the ball so quickly that the clubhead sometimes overtook the hands. And that, with his in-to-out swing path, put a right-to-left spin on the ball. Hogan was never renowned for great skills around the green, though he gave enough attention to that part of his game to be more than a match for most of his peers. No, it was perfection through the green that he sought, and for which he eventually became a legend throughout the golfing world. He eliminated his hook by adjusting his hands on the club so that he pronated on the way back, rolling the club face open, so to speak, and then cupping his left wrist so that the club face remained open right to the top of the backswing, his left thumb being directly under the shaft. Thus, he became one of the straightest hitters in the game. This, allied to an iron will and impenetrable concentration, made him the world's most admired and feared competitor from the mid-1940s through to the early 50s. Hogan, perhaps more than anyone, put in place the work ethic that is now the lot of the tournament professional. Before Hogan, such was the variable quality and sensitivity of the tools of a golfer's trade, that endless hours on the practice ground wasn't even a consideration. Indeed, the speed and scope of change in all elements of the game in the first half of the 20th century was such that the golf swing was constantly changing just to keep up with them.
I think there was a huge change years and years ago when the first rubber-cored balls came on the market. Now, if you look at the golf swings of those old gentlemen in their jackets and ties and shirts to play golf, all those swings were much more rounded and much longer because they had to get the ball in the air as well as hitting it forward. Now, once the steel shaft and the better golf ball came in, all swings shortened automatically. There was more control able to be attained because the ball was better. The ball flew in the air anyway. So swings have shortened. They've become more authoritative. In other words, the hitting areas become much more compact as opposed to it being long and flowing.
The last of the really draconian changes in equipment design was the move from hickory to steel.
I changed from hickory shafts when I was 14, was 1930, to steel. And I used to go around 73, 74 with wooden shafts around Bramley, Guildford, and my father gave me a steel-shafted club, and I just couldn't hit the ball off the ground. There was no torque. You couldn't, you see a hickory shaft, you could turn it back half an inch from the grip to the head, and so the ball, you could lift it in the air. But steel never gave way, and I hit daisy cutters for days. I nearly gave the game up. I thought, well, I never get the ball in the air. And how to get it in the air, it came after about a week. I managed to get underneath the back of it enough to send it in the air, but I nearly gave the game up. And then I put 50 yards on my drive immediately when I was 14 and a half.
When I got my first steel club, it was, I think, a 5-iron. Then I hooked the ball. I realized then, by execution of hitting shots, that if I didn't roll the hands, didn't pronate, I could stop the hooking. I couldn't hit the ball very far, though, because I wasn't using the feet and legs very much. The area where I practiced was always against the south wind, so I hit against the wind a lot. So I hit the ball high, and I didn't hit the ball very far. So by accident, I found that if I stayed through down longer, keeping the club this way longer, I could hit the ball down. Then I still didn't hit it far enough, so then, just by imagination, you started using my feet and legs through the shot, which people didn't do in those days. And so then I started swaying forward the whole body this way. And in doing that, then I got into a terrible shanking spell because moving your head forward, you'll shank quite often. So I finally realized that that was what's causing it, because then I keep my head back, but I still swung out underneath myself from the lower part of my body and moved into the left side. And I had a lot of flex in my knees and legs. The net result was that I had learned to take the club back straight and square, and I never did take the club back very far, only about 3/4 of the way back. I never reached horizontal. I really swung the club back by using the feet and legs and turning the body. and didn't use much hands. But of course I used a lot of hands in the lower part of the swing.
He knew what he wanted to do, and he changed his technique completely into almost a Nicklaus-type golf swing. Stood very close to the ball, weakened his grip, and swung very straight up and under. But in actual fact, in the hitting area, Byron Nelson's head went down at least 8 inches, and he got the width in the bottom by doing that.
John Daly is the realization of every golfer's dream. That is, to smash the ball huge distances every time he stands on the tee. Even so, it is a magically gifted short game that has enabled him to win some of golf's greatest prizes, rather than his long hitting. It would be easy for Daly to be swept along on a tide of admiration for his mighty hitting, perhaps to the detriment of his overall game. But he knows the importance of playing in the tournaments that really matter and staying competitive at the highest level. Consequently, while he never loses sight of the paying public's desire to see him hit the ball out of sight, he works hard on a wonderfully natural short game. This gives him the ability to still win tournaments and championships, while inevitably hitting the odd, very wild shot. Daly's great length stems from having had to use clubs too long and too heavy as a child. That's where his extraordinary long swing comes from. The vital element of Daly's swing is rhythm, and control of that rhythm throughout the entire length of the swing. He gets to the end of his backswing through great suppleness and an enormous shoulder turn, while still retaining a solid base with tension in hips and legs. The build-up of speed continues throughout the downswing until the clubhead arrives at the ball consistently travelling faster than man has ever been able to achieve before. Daly indeed is doubly blessed. His skill on and around the green should ensure he keeps his place amongst the game's elite, while his astonishing feats of long hitting will make him one of golf's great drawcards for many a year. Just as the world had got used to the idea of steel in place of hickory, so its attention was diverted by another draconian occurrence, the Second World War. When it finished, though, Byron Nelson was still in his prime, and in 1945 put together his 11 consecutive tournament wins, a record that will surely never be matched. But within a year or two, others were arriving to usurp his place in the sun. Legendary names to emerge in the immediate post-war era included Ben Hogan, Sam Snead and Jimmy DeMeritt, and there were others too, attracted by the growing rewards the game had to offer and its growing interest around the world. At the same time came a less dramatic but nevertheless continuous involvement in the way golf was played.
The thing that astounds me today is the amount of control that the modern player has of the distance of the shot to the flag. Now that is brought about twofold, equipment again, large ball and very tight fairways, and that you can spin the ball tremendously. Now, I was brought up on the small ball, more grass on the fairways, so you couldn't get that degree of contact. There was no sandpaper effect like there is today.
The ball is better. The ball is definitely better. The ball handles better, it's more consistent.
These days, there's definitely a much bigger part played as far as club fitting is concerned. So you can actually get a club to fit the individual. And to some extent, with the average golfer, you can actually have a club fitted to offset your problems or your faults in your golf swing. So, you know, if somebody is a slicer of the golf ball, they're going to have a club which is a little bit more upright to actually help the toe to come in a little more. So you can actually make some adjustments to the equipment.
For a good player, these perimeter-weighted clubs and all the new technology and everything doesn't mean that much. For a poor player, it means a whole lot.
The modern-day players play more with strength. They carry the ball through the air so much farther. They're not really the shot makers, I don't think, that the old-timers were, because I think it's out of necessity that the old-timers played that way. The ball didn't go as far. They kind of had to fit it around bunkers. Ground was a little harder. It was before the watering systems and stuff. And so they had to really manufacture some different trajectory of shots to get their ball where they wanted to go. Today on the golf courses, at least in the United States, that are perfectly manicured all the time, it's a game that's played more through the air.
We could not clean the ball or fix divot marks in those days. The greens basically were harder, were not kept wet, so we didn't have that much problem with divots. But you couldn't clean the ball unless we played under wet weather rules, which you could clean the ball then. But greens were pretty rough and stuff, and some of them slow and some fast. and we had to hit the putts. And you know, it's now then it's very smooth. There's no hitting. You just roll the ball. You don't actually hit it.
Not surprisingly, this consistency of quality, allied to hours spent grooving swings on practice grounds, has contributed to a levelling of the playing field in the upper reaches of competitive golf. 30 years ago, championships and tournaments were regularly won by 4 or 5 shots, and the pyramid of scoring was much steeper than it is today. What is harder to understand is that while the general standard has improved, the overall winning scores have not come down at all.
The winner scores are not much lower than what we did, because I averaged 68.3 one year, and that's still as low as anybody ever did. The scores for the field, everybody in the field, is lower than it used to be. But the winning scores still are not any lower than they were back in the days when Hogan and Snead and DeMeritt and Burke and Wood and Mangum and myself played.
Well, I think the golf courses are so much more difficult today than those courses that Byron did those scores on. Oh, absolutely. I mean, the courses now are absolutely fearsome.
I think it's very difficult to talk about, you know, what Nelson's scoring average was in the 1940s against the courses that were played then in combination with the equipment used then versus what Greg Norman's scoring average might have been in 1994, given the equipment and the place. I really think we're talking about an apple and orange situation. What we've seen, and this shouldn't be surprising because we see it in every athletic endeavor, is a compressionizing of the first to the last, where the range is not as great as it might have been 20 and 30 years ago. No question, equipment plays a role in that. But then so do the conditions of the golf course, so do the phenomena of on-site swing doctors. You've just got a variety of variables that are contributing to a compressionization of the first and last factor.
I think the old-timers were more of an artist, where the modern-day players are more of a gladiator.
Ernie Els is by 4 or 5 inches too tall to be the ideal size for a great golfer. However, his ability to organize his swing into an efficient repeating action has been at the root of his meteoric rise to the top. Inevitably, from his massive 6'3" frame, he has the width and strength to hit the ball great distances. His secret has been to control, even contain, all that power, and in so doing, keep the ball in play sufficiently often to produce the scores that win tournaments. His is a deceptively simple swing, where the great hands place the club head on line to the target with a full turn of the shoulders, the hips and legs scarcely moving, so founding a formidable base for the hole. However, it is his very size that occasionally is the cause of wildness, a tendency to pull the ball left being his one Achilles heel. But then, provided he can make a swing, he possesses the power to extract the ball from the ugliest of lies. And when recovery is needed, he is probably the best holer out of clutch putts in the game today. His is the putting stroke of youth, and it is to be hoped it lasts him well into the great years that must surely lie ahead. Golf, as we've seen, remains an ever-changing entity, one that continues to grow around the world. With that growth comes a continuous desire to find that certain gimmick, that particular toy, that might enable the possessor to take another quantum leap along the yellow brick road to swing perfection. Golf, since its inception, has been about the buying and selling of dreams. Instruction and the desire for information remain the prime driving forces at the commercial end of the game. For example, the selling of videos and magazines, not to mention the purchase of ever-changing and more astoundingly designed equipment with which to play it. At the center of this web, though, lie those who by design or accident have become the acknowledged authorities on how best to do it, the teachers. Wherever there is a desire to learn, so too will there be someone prepared to show them how. And so it has always been with golf. Now, as the leading players surround themselves with people and paraphernalia to enhance their performance, so has the guru emerged, the game Svengali, if you like, the high priests of those who've been telling us down the years just how to do it. They're the ones who've guided and directed the greatest talents to the heights they've achieved today.
I haven't invented anything. Everything that I know, I learned from someone else.
I can't bear the thought of having to teach somebody for an hour, because that's 10 minutes of instruction and 50 minutes of supervised practice.
I've heard of this Led B too, that teaches all these chaps. And I think he must what he does, he gives them confidence. And really, that's all these young fellas need, even today.
When I find somebody that can beat me, I'll go and have lessons from them.
Well, there are not many of them. But to be a good teacher requires rare skills if the message is to be got across.
I think there are some components that you have to have, though, that are virtually mandatory from my perspective. You have to be unselfish, number one, as opposed to a player. And that's always been a dichotomy. You know, I really get infuriated when people say that, you know, if you can, you play, and if you can't, you teach. That's garbage. Number two, a really broad-based understanding of the game that goes beyond this method that you think everybody should use, that's the great salvation of the golf swing. And lastly, I think you need an understanding of people. You really need to be a people person. You have to understand personalities, psychology, and you have to be able to get this whole package to fit, you know, so that there's a synergy involved between the golf swing, the person, and the equipment, and you. And this all kind of just rumbles together, and bing, now you've created this person whose handicap's dropped 5 or 6 shots.
I teach off the ball all the time. I think that the flight of the ball, the spin on the ball, and the direction the ball goes gives the student an awareness of the path of the club and whether the face angle's open or closed. And I try and teach them to observe the spin on their ball and the flight of the ball, because that tells them the path the swing was just on.
Jack Nicklaus, perhaps more than any golfer in any generation, influenced the way golf was thought about and taught during his long reign at the top. In view of what he achieved, perhaps that's not wholly surprising. From the time he stopped Arnold Palmer's domination in the mid-1960s until first Nick Faldo, then Norman sought to flatten the plane and path of their swings in the 80s and 90s, Nicklaus's upright style was deemed the way to do it. Again, only of average height, he stood tall and relatively straight-legged to the ball, as well as quite close to it. From there, it was straight back and up, high over his head, the right elbow jutting outwards and backwards to create the prism that held the club on line at the top of the backswing. The logic behind this swing and the large following it engendered was simple. The more pendulum-like you could make the swing, the straighter the ball must fly. Only Nicklaus really made it work, and there are those today who say he won all those titles in spite of his swing, not because of it. If so, what a competitor he must have been. Like all the truly greats, he could find the shot that mattered when it mattered. And as he himself put it, in the championships that counted, I could somehow go on playing my game long after they could no longer play theirs. Has domination ever been more simply or crushingly expressed? The desire for knowledge has always been there, but the likes of Jacobs, Harman and Ledbetter weren't about at the turn of the century, and the only way to acquire the rudiments of the game was to observe those about you who played it best.
Players on the East Coast the tendency was for the stance to be, and this is looking at probably Tom Morris, the fact that the stance used to be fairly closed, left foot forward, right foot back, and whereas on the other coast the stance would be a little opposite, a little more open. So. And as I say, I think this goes back to the fact that probably the players of the certain areas, I mean, if they were successful, people would look at them and say, well, this is the way obviously it must be done. So in their own way, these good players at that time became teachers of the game.
Golfers tend to imitate. They imitate what other golfers or the best players at their club or the best players in their area or the best players in the world are playing like, and they imitate what they're doing.
The emergence of the teaching professional has brought the science of golf forward in leaps and bounds, though much that is presented as new has been taught before, albeit in different form.
I would say the new theory that's called natural golf, which means swing the club down early from the top, I have used for donkey's years for a certain group of players, for the majority of handicapped golfers. But I don't tell everybody to do that.
A lot of the stuff we see today, guys putting the straps around people's arm. My dad used to take his belt off, an elastic belt, and tie it around people's arms in the 40s and 50s.
Of course, as the game has grown and developed, as equipment has evolved, condition of course has improved, and naturally technology has worked its way in wherever appropriate, so some elements of the way the game is taught and played have changed as well.
I think what you see now in modern teaching is you see people trying to take the use of the hands out of the golf swing a lot. Let your bigger muscles control what you do, meaning your torso. And I'd have to say that's the biggest thing that I've done in my teaching over the years. From what I did 20 years ago to what I do now, I like to see the bigger muscles take over where people don't get so handsy.
I don't happen to agree with that philosophy. First of all, so long as the hands are the only thing holding the club, then they're damn well important. And isn't it strange that the best players in the world have consummate control over their hands, while the everyday punter, to use your terms, doesn't have control of his hands? The first thing you have to learn in golf is how to control your hands, how to use them properly. Now, that doesn't mean that you spend the whole rest of your life working on them.
Teaching has predominantly been the preserve of the club professional, but as the tournament professional emerged, so too did a small tribe of high-profile golf gurus.
If we get into the modern days, I think David Ledbetter is probably the most popular of teachers, and I'm a big fan of David's. I think David's has been a great innovator in the way a lot of people teach. He's, as I like to say, he's made it the public aware of good instruction costs more money, so we all make a little more because of it. And David, thank you very much for that.
And I must say that these modern-day golf teachers, I take my hat off to them. I really sincerely do. They're marvelous marketers. They really know how to market themselves and their products extremely well. And that's something that I admire. Anybody that can market themselves well, I take my hat off to.
Henry Cotton was to British golf what Hogan was to American. He got to the top and stayed there through willpower and endless hours on the practice ground. Thus, not only was he able to groove a totally repeating swing, but he developed that tremendous strength in his hands that, to the end of his days, he believed essential to the playing of consistent golf. Cotton possessed what today would be called a weak grip. At the address position, he could see only one knuckle of the left hand, the back of that hand facing almost directly towards the target. This he compounded with a right hand very much over the top. All in all, a grip that, without the power in his hands, would have led to the mother and father of all slices. Not unlike Bobby Jones, his first movement away from the ball was with the hands, the club head only catching up after the first foot or so. He countered any tendency to fade the ball by dropping the club back down behind him at the start of the downswing, thereby coming into the ball fractionally on the inside. To the casual viewer, this would have looked a little like a flail at the top, but it was the movement that gave him considerable leverage in his swing and thereby power. Above all, Cotton was a fearsome competitor, and rather like Tony Jacklin 30 years later, his achievements were all the greater because, in the years either side of the war, he stood alone against the full might of those awesome players from the United States and triumphed. And when his playing days were done, Cotton remained in the public eye as a hugely respected teacher in several exotic parts of the world. With the top players leaving no stone unturned in their search for that vital edge, it's not surprising some have looked almost to the point of exhaustion at how they play the game and just what they might change to make it even better. In the case of Nick Faldo, this led to a complete reconstruction under the supervision of David Ledbetter.
I do know that those changes were precipitated by a need for something that he had more confidence in. So I think ultimately it was a mental chasm that had to be filled, and they did that by making some swing changes.
I thought that Nick's swing was a little long and loose. He tightened it up. He worked on position work. David's big on putting the club in various positions in the golf swing.
I played with Nick Faldo when he came out on tour at 17, 18 years old. And he had a figure of 8 backswing, and you know, he got shot at that with David Ledbetter. But essentially what he learned to do was take the club back and bring it down in the same plane.
The example Faldo set and what he achieved might well have been the spur for what Norman was to do with Butch Harmon 7 years later.
Well, if you look at Greg's swing in the past, he was very long, played from a very narrow stance, had a very steep and long backswing, and he tended to get his weight outside of his right leg. His right knee would kick out a little, the swing would go past parallel. As he started down, he had a tremendous slide of the hips to the left, which in turn let the club get stuck behind him a lot. Now he's great hand-eye coordination, so he was able to square the club with his hands a lot. Under pressure, he tended to hit that block shot to the right, and he had a difficulty controlling the distance that he hit his short irons. He was very good at just all-out full swing shots, but he wasn't as good as he wanted to be at taking something off the ball. One of the areas that I think he's improved tremendously in is the way he controls the distances of his ball. So what I tried to do was widen the stance, number one, to give a better foundation to work from, because I wanted to put a little more rotation in the hips on the downswing. I couldn't do that from a narrow position because he'd lose balance. I wanted him to get extremely wide off the ball with a big shoulder turn, and flatten the plane of the swing. In other words, bring the left arm down from a position here to more across the chest so that he could control the speed of the swing with his lower body and the speed of it. The way we achieved that is and average players can do this too, I made him hit off of a side hill with the ball above his feet, more or less at an angle like this. This flattens the plane of the swing on both ends, and that's how he actually got where he could feel what we were trying to do. Now, when you talk about how long did it take, I can honestly tell you we started in October of '91, and it wasn't until July of '92, when the British Open was at Muirfield, that he said he actually felt good under pressure with doing the things we'd done.
Arnold Palmer was in some ways the reincarnation of Walter Hagen, with his hit it hard, go find it, hit it hard again approach to the game of golf. Of no great height, but possessed of hands, arms and shoulders that would have done a blacksmith proud, Palmer at his peak was no stylist, concerned only with smacking the ball great distances, and using his considerable powers of recovery when impetuosity got him into trouble. Here too, it tended to be brute force rather than finesse that got him back on the straight and narrow. And the prime memories of the 60s and 70s are of fairways missed, recoveries, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but invariably respectable scores cobbled together any old how. As is common with golfers of normal height and stocky build, Palmer's swing was a rounded affair and somewhat old-fashioned as he rolled the club face open on the way back and closed it through the ball. With his speed of swing and power, this left little room for error, hence his sometimes wayward progress round the course. Essentially, Palmer controlled his golfing destiny with his hands. As a cricketer might adjust to last-second deviations of ball and bounce, so Palmer reacted to feelings of imperfection in his swing. The club face closing too fast? There was Palmer holding it square through the hitting area, finishing high, and with that familiar twirl at the top. Success at golf can be a fickle, fleeting thing, sometimes here today and gone tomorrow. And the battlefields of the game are littered with players who seemingly had their time in the sun, only to slip back into the shadows once more.
I find it very interesting that I can name 4, 5, 6 major championship winners. Bob Tway won a major championship, off the charts. Curtis Strange. Ian Baker Finch. Ian Woosnam. Even Mark Calcavecchia did it for a while. There are lots of guys, Seve. There are lots of guys who have won major championships and then for whatever reason gone right downhill.
I think the two biggest examples I can think of that the people can relate to would be Hal Sutton and Ian Baker Finch. Hal Sutton in our country was a fine player, won the PGA Championship at this very course in 1983, I believe. He was a great player, was going to be the next superstar, and he went to Jimmy Ballard at first, who had a very unique way of teaching, an unusual way of teaching. Ballard also had great success with Curtis Strange. And all of a sudden, Hal kind of lost his game a little, and he bounced from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher, myself even being one of them. And I think he went back to doing the basics that he always did when he played better, and he's playing well again. Ian Baker Finch is something that really saddens me to see. He has a problem driving the ball. It's almost as if it looks like he has the yips with the driver. I think Baker Finch is more of a little bit of a mental thing. So I think those two guys are good examples of really trying to do something that probably you shouldn't have done.
It's my considered opinion that it all was precipitated by a loss of putting. Sometimes the only difference between a mediocre ball striking round and a great ball striking round, the number of putts you make. And if you are making putts, you can put up with 5 irons that are 30 feet from the hole, or pitching wedges that are 20 feet from the hole, or drives in the rough. As soon as those putts don't fall, you start thinking that you have to hit it closer and closer and closer to the hole. And that creates a sense of urgency and tension, and then they go off on this journey to try and technically improve their golf swing, and in the process they lose sight of themselves. They lose sight of their personality and what got them there in the first place.
You know, Hogan said it so correctly. The secret is in the dirt. In other words, you hit enough balls in this dirt, you'll find it.
When you go wrong, my dad said, you put yourself right. He said, because, you know, if you're going to go into the theory of it, you'll be ringing up and me and finding out what went wrong. If things go wrong, put it right yourself. And then under pressure, you know what to do.
It's a very, very fine line that these guys have to walk. I want to get better, but in the process of trying to get better, don't lose who and what you were that made you good in the first place.
Severiano Ballesteros has always found golf a wonderful way to give full expression to his flamboyant Latin temperament. He plays golf as his fellow countrymen might fight bulls and their ladies dance the flamenco. In his prime, Ballesteros was like a beautifully set-up racing car, all the many thousands of parts well-oiled and moving in perfect harmony with one another. From an addressed position where the club is left motionless behind the ball, the hands dominate and dictate the swing. They take the club back low, then a crisp wrist break sets it straight at the target at the top of the backswing. Thereafter, they deliver it with perfect timing to send the ball unerringly to its goal. As much as anything, it was the sound of Ballesteros playing golf that set him apart, that exquisite click of club on ball that is the private preserve only of the greatest ball strikers in the world. But the days when all the myriad parts of the Ballesteros swing were all on song together were tantalizingly few. He arrived on the scene hitting the ball hither and thither, and in recent years has returned to the wayward ways of his flamboyant youth. Each time, though, there is ample consolation, as Seve then has to turn to the never-failing cornerstone of his game, pure wizardry round the greens. As is so often the case with genius, it cannot be turned on and off at will. For Ballesteros, the game remains fleetingly elusive, all too often the ball refusing to fly in the desired direction. Genius, however, can also reappear, and there are few who doubt there are still more days of glory yet to come for the magician that is Ballesteros. Few will ever scale the heights of a Ballesteros, but that won't stop them trying. Today the story is, if you want to reach the top at golf, you've got to work at it. And work for the tournament professional means the treadmill of the practice ground. The days of 1 or 2 stars dominating the game are past, and many have found that time spent grooving a swing through the endless hitting of balls on the range can produce a method that will survive the pressures of tournament play week in and week out. For the best, it keeps them on the high plateaus of the game. For the rest, many a small fortune is being made as a result of grind and graft.
The professional's practice process has evolved by virtue of what the good player of the time has been doing. There weren't a whole lot of people practicing a hell of a lot till Hogan came along and did his 8 to 10 hours a day, and then that became necessary. Now we've got Nick Faldo and Tom Kite and guys like that, and so there always seems to be these few players who, for them, practice and lots of practice is important, but they precipitate legions and legions of copycats and followers who think that they have to practice. You know, the reality is, at least on the American tour, I think most guys practice too much. They don't practice efficiently enough.
I was a little unusual in my practice. I did, after I learned to play the way I played, I was comfortable the way I was playing, the way I swung, and I just hit a few warm-up shots and go play. Because I was playing enough golf and playing enough rounds and so forth that I didn't have to work on my game. I didn't feel that I did. Maybe if I'd worked on it more than they did, I might have played better than what I did. I don't know. But I was comfortable with what I was doing, and I didn't experiment with my game or try to. I think the boys today, that there's so many swing gurus out there, that they're trying to swing perfectly. The man is not perfect. He's good, but he's not perfect. And I think when you start working too much, become too conscious of what you're trying to do, that it does bother you.
Yeah, I think some of them over-practice. I think they hit too many balls, wear themselves out, and one thing you don't want to do, especially before you tee off, is hit too many practice balls. I know I've lost quite a few tournaments. I was hitting them so good I didn't want to quit.
Because if you look in the old days, Ben Hogan practiced a tremendous amount of time. A great player like Billy Casper hardly ever practiced. You mentioned Bobby Locke, who could be considered one of the greatest players the game's ever had, even though he played years ago, didn't believe in practicing a lot. You look at a Fred Couples, for example, who's not a big ball beater. His physical condition doesn't allow that with his back problems. But then you look at a Faldo and a Norman who hit a tremendous amount of balls. But I think it's an individual thing. You can't get better, you can't improve, you can't make changes without putting in the time. You just have to have a swing that repeats itself, and the only way you can get that is through practice.
I practiced very hard till I was 17, but after that, 17, 18, I got it. And I never practice. I used to play with Bobby Locke. We used to go around the course practicing, never on the practice ground. Bobby Locke and I were at Tam O'Shanter in the States, Chicago, playing there in about 52, 53. And there were 30 or 40 pros, Yank pros out there, practicing. And they were playing, we were drinking tea in the clubhouse watching them. He said, look at that lot. He won it, Bobby Locke did, and he finished second the next year. But we watched these chaps playing these divots, and they came along every night, swept the divots up, and the next day they'd move forward. After a week we were there were 40 yards of divots, was bare ground for 50 yards wide, and all the divots had gone. These chaps had been practicing all day there while we sat watching them, and Bobby Locke still won it.
Well, it's interesting that every player has an Achilles heel in their swing. Whatever their main fault is, it always crops up. Every time Greg and I work, we most of the time work on the same thing all the time, because his tendencies are like anyone else, and they'll creep back in if you don't work.
My greatest fault still would be the tempo of the swing getting quick. I'm constantly working on the tempo of the swing getting quick. Also checking all these fundamental points: distance I stand from the ball position, my alignment, my posture, basic things. And over and above those, the tempo of the swing is all I think about, and then I just try and hit the ball.
I think the reason why Nicklaus was so successful is for years after years after years is he went back every year, every winter, and worked on the same fundamentals with Jack Grout. Every winter they did the same thing, and he came right back out and played good year after year. And I think that's the thing we miss, the teachers miss, and some of the students miss, is trying to do the exciting new stuff rather than working on the basic fundamentals.
You come to the practice tee with a purpose. You don't want to just come here and hit balls and go away and get to your house and think you didn't really work on anything. You know, I think you got to come into the practice tee with a purpose. You got to work on something specific. I normally come to the practice tee and try and get my address and alignment right. That's very important for, especially a day before the tournament starts. You want to be aiming at the target, or if you're hitting a draw, you want to be aiming maybe 5 yards right of your target or whatever. So I work on my alignment, I look at my where I'm aiming, and just work on a rhythm and try and hit the ball solid.
Sam Snead will forever be listed amongst the greatest players of the game, both for the undeniable beauty of his swing and for the enormous distances he hit the ball. Indeed, it was the perfection of the former, the effortless grace with which he sent the ball on its way, that concealed the great power he was able to bring to the striking of a golf ball. While a vastly different character, there was much of the liquid gold of a Fred Couples swing in the way Snead hit the ball. In one fluid, flowing motion, he would take the club back high above his head before bringing it down again on an almost identical pattern plane. No rush, no hurry, and the ball once more miles down the fairway. Snead's greatest asset was a beautiful pair of hands. Tremendously strong, he had an almost mesmeric address position, whereby he held the club head away from the ball, seemingly forever, before bringing it back one last time, immediately prior to starting the backswing. Then away he would go once more. It was a swing that never altered, and one that carried Sam to titles in 6 different decades, and more than 150 tournament victories. If the golf course is a tournament player's place of business, then the practice ground is his workbench. But, it must be said, there are those who make poor use of their time there.
I think the biggest thing, not only in the really good players, but in the average players and the players at local country clubs, is we get so caught up in some things that sound hard or are very, very technical or very fun to work on, like swing plane or arc or, width and, all these things, club face angles and hinge angles, all these neat words, and we forget about working on your aim and working on your setup, which if you don't get set up good, you can't hit the ball good. I think with today's cameras and all the video equipment and all the new instructors, there's so many people teaching golf that sometimes we get ahead of ourselves. We get a little too technical. And that's great if you're trying to find a fault and you can't figure it out, use the video camera. But sometimes we rely too much on the high-tech stuff. And again, like I said, don't go back and work on fundamentals.
Also different to the way the game was once played, and it must seem another world to the stars of yesteryear.
I laugh, really. I don't know. I just teed the ball up and hit it. I've never fussed about my golf swing, ever. And I've never wanted to tell you the truth. Because when I could hit the ball straight as a boy, what do I want to know what I'm doing? So I've never really given it a thought, and I don't want anybody to tell me. Otherwise, I'll be up there trying it, and that'll put me off completely.
Well, you should practice, and when you're hitting it good, quit. Don't just keep practicing, because then you'll revert right back to where you started. So when you practice and you're hitting it good, that is after you've hit a couple dozen or 2 or 3 dozen balls, then stop.
I think that the main thing about the average player, we'll talk about the average player now, I think that he should not practice as much with the long game, practice more with the short game. Because the figures have proven that about 70% of your shots are made from 100 yards in. So all they want to do is hit a home run, hit a home run, hit a ball.
Driving is so easy. So I would say the good player practices his weakness. They practice the short game a lot because that's where they're playing for the back pocket. That's where they're going to get rich or not.
Oh, probably 65% of the shots we hit on and around a golf are from under 100 yards, but yet we don't spend 65% of our practice time working there.
I'd say I spend at least half my time working on the wedge game, the pitching, the putting, the bunker shot, stuff like that. I think that's where my career has gotten better and better, is in the short game.
You want to go out, you want to hit all kinds of different golf shots. You want to hit little chip shots over the bunker, lob shots, chip and run shots, and just get the feel. When you get that feel, it really becomes a little easier.
I would suggest don't be practicing it on your own, be practicing it with a friend and gamble a little. I can remember 1-2 evenings with Gary Player in Switzerland many, many years ago, Crown-sur-Sierre, and we were both staying in the golf hotel, and we went out every evening with half a dozen balls, and he would pick a place and we would play from there, then I would pick a place and so on, and we competed all the time. That meant you tried with every shot.
Golf is a game that you must practice, and practice a lot. Short game is where you go up the ladder or come down the ladder. If you have a good short game, well, you can stay around par or better. So practice your short game.
Lee Trevino has been the clown prince of golf from the moment he burst on the scene in the mid-1960s by winning the US Open, right up to the present day as one of the leading lights of the Seniors Tour. He is to golf what Walter Hagen was in his day, quite simply the greatest showman around. And like the Hague, Trevino has had a swing all his own. No textbook ever taught you to stand so open, belly button almost pointing to the hole. And no textbook ever prescribed an outside-to-in loop designed to dispatch the ball off down the left side of the fairway, only at the end drifting back into the middle. Trevino's secret, though, was great rhythm. That, plus a swing that followed the same path every time, to the point where, for years, he was amongst the most accurate players of the game. So a method all his own, and one no teacher was ever allowed to interfere with. Trevino's greatest strength, though, was the way he was able to keep the club face square to the line of flight, not only through the strike, but seemingly for yards afterwards, certainly longer than any golfer before or since. Finally, Trevino wasn't just a left-to-right slugger. At will, he could finesse the ball this way or that, high or low, and in his prime he was quite simply one of the best exponents of the game there's ever been, and an absolute joy to watch. But for all the hours spent agonizing over address positions, swing planes, and repeating rhythms, it is on the putting green that championships are won and lost. Such is the wealth of talent in world golf, there's no longer room at the top for anyone who might even be considered a poor putter. At tour level, they're good or very good, and one or two are great. There is much we could learn from watching the best at work. After all, it's on the putting green that we could come closest to the top player's performance. Yet club golfers give little attention to the one part of the game where handfuls of shots could be saved. So who would the experts consider to be the ideal putter?
I would like to mix Ben Crenshaw's rhythm with Phil Mickelson's technique. I love the technique that Phil Mickelson applies to the stroke of his ball. He hits the ball with that gorgeous upstroke, which gets the ball rolling quicker. Ben Crenshaw's rhythm is the factor that I love about his putting stroke. Put those two together and you've got a magnificent stroke. The principles of being a good putter. Number one, I believe that one needs to be able to address the ball with the blade square to the target at both the address and strike position. Number two, the blade of the putter needs to be square to the path of the stroke through the hitting area. Belief number three, one should strike this ball with an upstroke. And belief number four, every putt is a straight putt, but it depends on how hard you hit it as to whether it takes the break. The person that comes to me and says, I don't need to practice my putting anything like the way I need to practice my full game and my short game, I don't believe they've really felt what it means to be a winner, because the winners all come from guys who putt well.
And there's no one that would disagree with that. It was Gary Player who suggested that golf was a puzzle without an answer. Perhaps more accurately, it could be described as a puzzle with many answers. What is certain is that as many as take up the game of golf, so there will be that number of different swings around the world. There is much that can be learnt from those who've done it better or for longer, those who've got more talent or have spent their lives at it. But in the end, you must decide what works for you, and when you've got it, then stick with it. Remember that golf's a journey, not a destination, and in Walter Hagen's words, don't forget to stop and smell the flowers along the way. Many a great player has worked the game out for himself, and those whose swings have survived the test of time have usually stayed with what God gave them in the first place. For the rest, it will never be that easy. We'll need help to find the way, but there are those out there to give it. And remember, there's no one swing for everybody, but everybody has one swing. That swing may not be perfect, but it can still be made to work. And when it comes to understanding the game, perhaps the old boys have the answer.
We're playing match play championship at Hoylake, and he was drawn against Henry Cotton. There was a great rivalry match. And Bobby Locke said to me in the clubhouse, Max, he said, I've lost my putting touch. Would you mind coming out and having a look? I said, certainly, Bobby. So we went over to the 16th green, which was only 50 yards away, and he had 3 balls in his pocket. He put the 3 down. He hit one very badly, this first one. And I said, good God, addressing the second one, I put my finger right under the front of his putter. I said, look. I said, your front of your putter's right off the ground, Bobby. You're not like that. Good God, he said, that's it. He touched the pin with the second putt, about 15 yards, and the next one finished an inch from the hole. I walked up to pick these balls up. By that time, I picked him up to come back for him to do it again. Look round, he was 15 yards off the green, walking back. I said, oi, what are you doing? Oh, he said, that'll do me. Wonderful, he said. Thank you very much, Max. Yeah, that's how he's practiced 3 balls. 1 badly, 2 good ones, off the green, gone. And that's my attitude.